Hello and welcome to the Refinery Podcast. In this episode, I'm talking with the man himself, Mr. Paul Martinelli. Paul is the #1 coach in the world. He's trained more people in coaching than anyone else in history. He is the founder of the John Maxwell team and Empowered Living, and it has been my great privilege to serve as his writing partner and call him my friend and mentor. He always has great stuff to share. I know you'll get a lot out of it. Let's get into it. Well, hey, Mr. Paul Martinelli, welcome to the Refinery Studio.
Man, first off, let me just say, the Refinery Studio is pretty awesome. This is a great place to shoot. I mean, the crew is great, right? Ken, Allie, your
Stellar.
team. Oh, yeah, just
Stellar.
Awesome. Like, puts you right at ease,
Yes.
right? And then, look, there's worse places to be than, Greenville, South Carolina.
I agree.
Right? I mean, it's beautiful here.
I agree. And I have to admit, there are days when I come in here and I'm just working and I close the door and pull the curtain and all of a sudden the sound is like, this is my place.
Yeah, well, this is truly a look for any look. If you're looking to film content or even audio record, this is a great place to do it. I see so many people who are kind of in our space,
Right. Yeah.
just struggle. Right? They get so in their head about lights, cameras, and action.
Yeah.
And it's just like if you would have just paid a couple of $1,000s and let somebody worry about all of it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And then it's perfect, right?
Yes.
Because you see people who spend all afternoon to do a 3-minute video.
Yes, absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
So
congratulations. This is great.
Well, and listen, if it weren't for Ken, I mean, I wouldn't be doing most of this stuff. And the way I go with Ken is like he tells me what to do and I do it.
Yeah.
As far as the studio goes, right?
Yeah.
He's like, I think it'd be better if we had this piece of equipment. I said, done. I'm on Amazon getting it. So,
well, look, I've worked, as you know, I've worked all over the world.
Yeah.
And I've been in lots of studios, right?
Yeah.
And I can know in about 6 seconds.
Yeah.
Oh, I can know 6 seconds whether this guy knows his stuff or doesn't know his stuff, right?
Yeah.
And Ken's right there.
He's the real deal.
Yeah,
He's the real deal. Well, listen, anyone who knows me and spends any time around me, sometimes I have to apologize because I tell them, look, if we're going to spend time together, you're going to hear me talk about Paul Martinelli.
Oh, well, thank you. That's nice.
Because you've been that important in my life and huge. And of course, right now, the work we're doing is content based and it's all around the sales platform that,
Sure.
Is really kind of a reimagined of a sales system that's already generated well over $1 billion worldwide, right? Yep. People might associate that you were the guy that started the John Maxwell team. They might understand that you're with Empowered Living. Anyone who's spent any time listening to you understands why people follow you as their thinking partner, as their mentor, why so many people do. I have to tell you that all of that's been true and all of that's been great for me, but it was the sales system itself, the original one that changed it. It changed everything for me. and
it's so much more than a sales program.
It is way more.
So much more than
it
a
is.
sales
It is
program.
way more. And my way of describing it was, I'd been in business and, incrementally trucking along and it was going okay.
Yeah.
It was going okay.
Yeah.
And I got into that sales stuff and listening to you teach on it and thinking about myself getting engaged in it. And it was like standing naked in front of the mirror,
Yeah.
I was all of a sudden, it was like boom, 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 boom. Everything that I had been doing wrong to blow sales was right there.
Right there.
But, I forced myself to keep taking a look and see what's going on. And then, I kept moving forward with it, right?
Well, hopefully, I think one of the things about the program is that while you're standing there, naked in front of the mirror, right? And you're seeing, every imperfection in your sales process, there's also a balance of encouragement and support so that so it's not like we show you, look how terrible you are.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely
now
not.
let's walk with you, right?
No.
And I think that's
it.
important.
Well,
too.
look, life is a merciless mirror sometimes but it's not if you're willing to take a look and grow and move, right? And so, it was very gentle. In fact, what attracted me to it, and part of the reason besides the results that it's gotten for me is the approach. And my wife and I are getting ready to collectively go back through what I think if I hadn't had the results specifically, I would be calling this other program fully resourced. Oh, the best. It's so good. We were talking about the other night at dinner. So my wife and I are now going to go through that together.
Oh, the game changer together.
So
game changer together.
Yeah, it's very powerful, and I recommend. If you don't know what that is, let's talk about it. If people need to ask, because we'll tell you all about it. But
the brilliance of fully resourced.
Yeah.
Is none of it's mine, right?
Yeah.
It's a collection of all of the greatest thinkers that I studied, right?
Right, yes.
Because I came in as a high school, I was truly the poster child for personal growth, right? I was the 22-year-old guy that was lost. I was, in the wrong direction, and I was picking up speed.
Yeah.
And so I started, I cut my teeth in personal growth studying dead guys.
Right.
So in the 1990s, while everybody else was, in Hawaii walking on fire with Tony Robbins, I was reading Thomas Troward, right?
Yeah, my favorite.
Completely different level of awareness there, right?
Yes.
And, that's not a knock to Tony. It's just, there's no comparison with Troward or anybody, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so I was studying, Nightingale and Troward, and I was studying Hanel, and I was, Waddles and Hill and all of, and James Allen. And I timelined my life, and I looked at where did I have the biggest shift in awareness, because awareness is the start of all transformation, right?
Right.
And then my greatest growth, and then that's how I created the program. So it's awesome.
Yeah.
But all of that, I just have license to brag because I did the work, and I think
I did.
Not only did I do the work in curating the content.
Sure.
But I walked the less. There's nothing in fully resourced I didn't do.
Yeah, you were already a product of the product, and it is universal.
Yeah,
and so. It doesn't matter what your profession is.
Yep.
It doesn't matter where you are in your business. If you're an entrepreneur, obviously the people that are going to be listening to this are probably in the entrepreneurial world in some way, but it's universal. And meaning that, look, this is God's universe, and you're teaching stuff that is in alignment with the way God made the universe, right?
Yeah, I mean, anything else is, incomplete, right?
Yeah, and I think it does just an elegant job of helping you participate in those processes that are 100% available 100% of the time, and guess what? 100% free, right?
And they work everywhere you're tried.
Yeah.
And you're right. We had people at every level of awareness, forget industry, but every level of awareness and result, right?
Yes.
I mean, I've got friends of mine who are multimillionaires who went through that program and said, I walked away with several ideas that I know are going to make $1 million.
100%. I can totally see it, and I'm looking forward to. So we're getting ready. We're gonna spend about 5 days.
Wow, that's the way to do it.
And we're gonna just dig in.
Oh wow! Yeah, get yourself binge watching on a weekend or something. Yeah, take a Friday and Saturday.
We are getting it. We said
weekend.
Yeah. She said, I want to go through that with you. I said, okay, but we're not doing it in this house. So we made arrangements.
Nice.
Yeah. We're gonna go to Tennessee to my brother's lake house, and we're gonna just dig in. Yeah. So
nice.
And then of course now, like I said, we're into this. We're into this sales reimagining this whole sales platform.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Oh, thank you.
It's so good.
Yeah.
So just for right now, just kind of pop down through what are we doing with the sales program? Where is it going? People that are going to be involved in that, what are they going to get? If they're getting this, what are they getting?
Yeah. So the first program was such a success, and it was really. It's almost like the story of the reluctant hero, right? Because I've trained more people to be speakers and coaches than anybody else in the world, living or dead.
Yeah.
And I saw really talented people like yourself.
Yeah.
Who weren't afraid of putting on overalls and working.
Right.
Struggle.
Yeah.
And and the only reason why is because they could not transfer the awareness that they had into other people. They didn't know their value proposition, right?
Right.
And so that was the first tier, was just kind of showing people the tactics of sales and then the psychology of it, right?
Right.
And then after we did it and launched it, and it was, a great success, I thought, okay, now if we really wanted to put something together that would make, that could put a cherry on top of this.
Right.
And again, I went back to my life and said, okay, what were the things that made the biggest difference to me?
Right.
And certainly one of the things was hypnotherapy.
Oh, yeah.
And so we added an entire syllabus in hypnosis, showing the power of the subconscious mind. And then what we did is we had, you met Scott,
yes.
the top hypnotist.
Yes.
We had him take each step of the 11-step process and then take the teaching and learning of that and create, a hypnotist guided tour through it. So when you're going through the program, it's being anchored into your subconscious mind. So
which is massive power.
Yeah. So it becomes a default in behavior and thinking, right?
Yeah.
Then, we also looked at it from kind of 4 modules. First is the messenger.
Yes.
And so what would the person who's the salesperson need to know? So we enhanced the teaching on money, on overcoming our money paradigm, which is a big piece.
And probably no one else has, really.
Nobody does.
And certainly not at the level that you're teaching it.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Helping, because at the end of the day, one of the reasons why people struggle with sales is they're afraid to have a financial conversation.
And that's what it is.
Yeah. But then we added the 7 levels of conscious awareness so that you can really kind of modify your own behavior and kind of really look at what you're doing. Mm-hmm. We added how people set goals, the 5 mistakes that people make in goal setting, so that people don't get stuck at a particular level. Right.
Yeah.
Then we dive in and we teach the model, but we really focus on each of those commitment objectives, and I think that's another thing that no other sales program teaches. Right. Everybody else is ABC,
always be closing. Right. Yeah.
And I've just seen it happen over and over again. I've been on both sides of it. I've been on where I have ambushed sales and where people have tried to ambush me.
Right.
And nobody, everybody likes to buy. Nobody wants to be sold. Right. And so there's an enhanced version of that. And then we look at the message and we look at, the language patterns, the need for rapport. We look at all the tonalities and there's a deeper teaching, and then the market. And this is another change to the program where we brought in Regina Brime, who's an expert in DISC and emotional intelligence.
She's stellar. She's so good.
Yeah. And so we're helping the person first understand DISC was a big wake up call for me, right?
Yeah.
I had a time. And this was only 10 years ago. So, I had already been successful.
Yeah.
But look, you don't need to be sick to get better.
Right.
And, the largest room in my house is the room for improvement. Right. And so when I learned DISC, I that period of time before learning DISC, I'd gone through 9 assistants in 6 months.
Yeah.
And so, they were working for a maniac was the problem.
There was a common denominator in those 9, right?
Yeah, it was talking about naked in front of the mirror, man. It was me. And, I realized, okay, I'm a high D. And, I leave the dead and wounded behind, and I just keep marching on.
And let me ask about that. Do you leave the dead and wounded behind, walking out of the room going, well, that was a really great meeting?
Oh, perfect meeting for me. Yeah.
I understand.
You're one of those too, right?
Yeah. So everybody's back there licking their wounds, right? Yeah.
And so imagine if you're a high D, don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
Don't understand what your motives and behaviors are.
Right.
And then you're trying to sell to a C.
Yes.
Or an S. And then you walk out and you wonder why why aren't they returning my calls, right?
Yeah.
And so we added the assessment, we added, everything necessary for somebody to really understand their style as a salesperson, and then how to, regulate their behavior and language patterns and to use the system when selling different styles.
And that's the emotional intelligence piece of it, right? Understanding the moment and your awareness in it and your management of yourself and management of other people's emotions in that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, absolutely. If you think about it, like in sales, what you're trying to do is, help people solve a problem.
Yeah.
People, it goes back to it's all this stuff is simple, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so I can go in and really understand your problem and have a great solution for it. But if I don't convey to you with 100% certainty that not only do I understand your problem, not only can I solve your problem, that I want to solve your problem. Yeah. I have empathy for you.
Yes.
And then I want to help you get out of this pain, and I want to help you get where you're going.
Yeah.
That's the difference maker.
That
right?
is the difference.
And that's all EQ, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I mean, that's all EQ.
Yeah.
And then we added in with Laurel Johnson, another fantastic kind of train her on negotiating.
Yeah.
I mean, she's been doing negotiation now for almost 2 decades. She works with one of the largest oil companies in the world.
She's a true pro at it.
She's a true master.
Yeah.
And, as she says, sales and negotiations are similar.
Yes.
Right? But they're more cousins than they are siblings.
Right.
And so, so you think everything that you're talking about in sales, that it's all a price negotiation, and it's not, right?
And that's really where that ABC sort of model comes from, right?
I think you're right. Yeah, I think it's all these antiquated ways of doing. And then we looked and we said, what else? How do we make this even better? And we thought we should talk about the power of the subconscious mind, because really, whenever you're working with somebody, what you're doing is you're really talking to that person's belief system.
Yeah.
Right? Now, they don't know that, and you may, if you're not aware of that, you don't know that. Right?
Yeah.
And so you will get a visual and auditory compliance.
Right.
When people nod and say yes, and they agree. Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And then leave the room and go get in your car and drive back and send up the follow-up email and. That best friend you just had 20 minutes ago is now Casper the Friendly Ghost.
Yeah, there's actually a proverb that it has the words "as a man thinketh," right?
Yeah,
and it says that basically it's like you go to do business and you're interacting and everything. In essence, I'm summing it up. It looks great, everything looks good.
Yeah,
but then in a man's heart, as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. It's basically saying. It's basically cluing you in, like, hey, it may look like one thing's happening, but pay attention, because what's going on in the heart is really what matters, right?
Yeah, well, that is where in our other than conscious mind, our subconscious mind, infinite intelligence, whatever name you want to give it,
right?
That's where our self concept is, right? So it's our self belief, it's our self esteem, and you never outperform that. And that part of you drives all of your behavior, all of your decision-making process. So, we thought it would be really powerful to be able to equip the people who went through this program with the understanding of that, like the mechanics of how that works.
Yeah.
But in a way that it's cookies on the bottom shelf, right?
Right.
You're not.
We're not having a college course here.
No, you're not. Yeah, you're not going. You're not going away for college here.
Yeah.
But then also very real. Very simple things that you can do to bypass that logical mind and build emotional certainty. And then, so we looked at that. So we've added that. And then we work with John Ruhlin, the author of Giftology.
Right.
Understanding, reciprocity. Because in the sales process, if you approach sales with, again, one of these just simple idioms, right? Giver's gain.
Right. Yeah.
That, if I can help enough other people get what they want, I end up getting what it is that I want. I mean, these are really simple processes, but how do you put them in action? And how do you put them in action in a sales conversation? So John comes in and, he shares how to use gifting.
Yeah.
In an elegant, appropriate, genuine, strategic way.
Okay.
Right? And again, this is one of those things that, until you really study it for a little bit,
right?
You're standing naked in front of that mirror and you're thinking, "Oh my goodness, all those $10 gift cards I gave away all those years was completely worthless."
Right.
Those $100 gift cards I gave, completely worth it if it's not genuine and strategically done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is a completely different program and unlike, I think, anything on the market. Well, I know it. And so, that's one piece of it is you or the team has, 6 months of unlimited access to that. And then there's 6 hours of live role-playing calls every single week.
Yeah. Who else is doing that?
Nobody's doing that. No one. Right. And then there's 5 hours of private one-on-one coaching for the team.
Yeah. And look, I'm going to say, I know these coaches.
Oh yeah,
these people are solid. They're not,
Oh yeah,
they're not reading from a script. These people are proven. They have success in this system.
Oh yeah,
and they're really great at sharing that success with other people.
And they want to. Yeah, these aren't people who read it in a book, right? No. These are people who sell every day for a living.
Yeah.
Right? So when they're talking to another sales professional who's going through the course, who's facing a challenging market. Like imagine, at the time of this recording, we've seen interest rates go up, 7 points,
right.
9 points, right? And we're at an inflation rate of, 40-year high. So imagine being a real estate or a car salesperson and that economy, right?
Yeah.
The coaches that we have
They are.
They're in the trenches every day, selling every day in that same marketplace.
Well.
Yeah, and they're doing well. And they understand the market, they're relevant, right? So it's a relevant voice. And then we have a live event, right?
Yeah.
So where everybody gets to come in, and it's a great networking event and an opportunity, and iron sharpens iron. It gives you an opportunity to meet other people who are, also committed to growth.
Yeah, well, and look, at just like any other event like that with Empowered Living or with you and that I've been to, you leave there and it's the purpose for which you went. There was the content, there was the course, there was all of that.
Yeah.
But it's the people.
Oh yeah.
And when you spend 2 days with people that are vibrating at a high frequency, I mean, they're living out in their lives what it means to think better, to act better. And they're generous as well.
Yeah,
it's incredible the influence that it has on a person.
I forget who said it. It might have been Bob Proctor, and Bob said, what you want to do is you want to really be intentional about placing yourself in an environment conducive to growth at every opportunity you have.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then, Les Brown would follow that up and say, if you're the smartest person in your group, you need a new group.
Yeah, get a new group.
If you're the richest person in your group, you need a new group.
Yeah, right.
And that's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's been amazing to be involved in it, and of course the people that you're mentioning. It's been a real pleasure for me to meet them and get to spend some time with them as well, and I'm looking forward to the continued work on this. And for me, we could use this studio for any kind of content. We could use it. We could have all kind of people come in here, but I want to have the people coming in here that are talking about the things, building the things that are the kind of things that I would want.
Yeah.
And that are doing it with the character, or that are the people that I would want to, go out to dinner with and spend time with, right?
Well, you just had Rick Ruperto in here who, again, in the sales program is, he's the top coach and trainer. And, Rick spends every hour of his day professionally, fighting for people's dreams.
Yeah.
Right. And that's who you want in this room.
That's
right?
who you want.
That's who you want. That's who you want to do business with. And that's who, that's what this space is dedicated to, is people who want to change the world. Right. And have something to say at a time where it probably needs to be said.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So, well, like I said, it's a huge privilege. I am aware that there are people who are watching this who may not be aware of your story. So, and I know you've told your story. You've told it through me sometimes.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Writing it and in many different ways. So, let's just talk about your best summary of your story. And I've got some other things that I want to understand about not just your backstory, but it's kind of in recent years and
sure.
And we had a really great conversation the other night, and I said we need to talk about this on the podcast, right?
Yeah.
And so we want to share some of that, but
yeah. So I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was raised by a single mom.
Yeah.
My dad left the family when my mom was 3 months pregnant with me.
Okay.
And we were poor. Right. And you grew up like that. And, there's two kinds of poor. One kind is, you're poor and you don't know it.
Yeah.
The other, because you're surrounded by love and, love goes a long way.
Right.
And then there's the other one where you're poor and you know it. And we were poor and we knew it. Growing up, my mom was, my childhood home was not a safe place. It wasn't safe physically, it wasn't safe emotionally, verbally. She was very abusive.
Right.
And, look, she was perpetrating, what she learned in her life experience, right?
Yeah,
She was abused. And unfortunately, she lacked the level of awareness to break the cycle.
Yeah.
And so every child deals with trauma completely differently.
Right.
And so for me, I went inward.
Okay.
And I developed a speech impediment. So when most kids started to talk, I didn't.
Right. Yeah.
And it was a debilitating speech impediment. Right. Like I spoke. I mean, it was that bad. I spoke like this. And this is in the 1970s, right? So 1970s, that's a learning disability.
Yeah, right.
So I was immediately labeled learning disabled, treated that way. And, I would later come to realize that we rise to those lower expectations.
Yes.
The interesting thing, I think, of my story is that for most of us, we've been programmed to believe that it's our DNA and it's our environment that controls everything.
Yeah.
And so, I've got 2 older brothers and an older sister. We all grew up at 430 Coolidge Avenue.
Yep.
We all were born and raised in a Italian traditional Catholic lower socioeconomic background.
Right.
We all went to Lincoln Elementary, Jefferson Junior High School, and the rest of them graduated. I didn't.
Yeah.
My one brother has a PhD in engineering from Carnegie Mellon University. Yeah. Right? My other brother, graduated University of Pittsburgh with a degree in microbiology and was an Apache attack helicopter pilot.
Yeah.
My sister graduated #1 in her nursing school, right?
Yeah, right.
And I failed out at 15, right?
Yep.
And so you have to ask yourself, like, what happened? How do you produce 3 successes and then 1 failure?
Right.
And it's just that I was so in my head.
Yeah.
And I was so our beliefs are created 2 ways. One is through spaced repetition of time.
Okay.
That's the power of affirmation.
Right.
Being introduced to an idea, concept, thought, or image over and over and over until it becomes fixed in your subconscious mind.
That's why a person would want to use hypnosis today, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And the other is through an emotional sudden impact when something happens to you. And that's another reason why you want to create and use hypnotherapy, because hypnotherapy can allow you to have the experience without the event.
Yeah, right. Separate out the emotion
You
there, right?
bet.
Yeah.
And so for me, I was picked on and teased on the playground. I was, held back. I was always, sent to special ed.
Yeah.
Right. So this concept of me being dumb or stupid was anchored. And so I failed out of school, landed a dead-end job as a roofer making $4.10 an hour.
Yeah.
And I was just reproducing my belief system,
Right.
that I'll never amount to anything without an education.
Yeah.
And, I served 4 years on the roof.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is the entire time while I was on the roof, my spirit continued to seek fuller expression and fuller expansion.
Yeah, talk about that. How did you know? Did you, let me ask you this.
That.
You didn't know it then. You know it now, right?
I know it now.
Okay.
So, I would still want to be and do and have more.
There was an unsettled part of you that knew there was something else, right?
Wattles, who wrote Science of Getting Rich, he defines it this way. He calls that nudge that we feel to step into greatness, desire.
Yeah, right.
And he said what desire is the effort of that unexpressed possibility within you, seeking expression with and through you. That's what desire is. And so, I would be on the roof and I would have an idea of starting another business or doing something new. And what I would do is what everybody does. I turned to Tony.
Yeah, right.
Tony's on the roof. Tony didn't have the brains not to get on the roof that day either.
He's probably thinking about what he's going to have for lunch, right?
If he's thinking at all, right? He was the epitome of what Shaw said, right? 2% of the people think, 3% of the people think they think, and 95% of the people would rather die than think. Yeah. I would start my day off with, we'd smoke a joint at the warehouse.
Yeah.
And drive to the job and smoke a joint before we go up on the roof. And then, take a break an hour in, smoke a joint.
Yeah.
That was my day.
Right.
And I didn't, and I wondered why things weren't working out, And then my mentor stepped in. His name was Curtis Sliwa, founder of the Guardian Angels.
Okay.
And he got me out of Pittsburgh and moved me down to South Florida to start working with a group of business people down in South Florida who were this is like 1986, so crack is huge.
Right?
Oh yeah,
the
crack,
right.
Cocaine epidemic, and it was huge in South Florida. So I go down there and have a complete paradigm shift. Now all of a sudden I'm no longer I'm out of that negative environment.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm in a city that, isn't, 150 years old.
Right.
Right. That isn't entrenched and isn't kind of, everything is already old. All the roads are cracked and all the sidewalks are cracked and all the buildings are already falling apart. I come into South Florida and everything's brand new and there's this hope and there's this entrepreneurial spirit that's palatable. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. Right.
Yeah, right.
And, I start my first business. I take a couple of $100. I buy a used vacuum cleaner, a mop bucket and wringer, some Pledge furniture polish, and a bottle of Windex. And I start going door to door.
Went out and did it.
Yeah. And asking people if I could clean their office at night. And, surprisingly, for the first 2 years, it worked. I mean, I didn't realize, that in 1988, it was one of the worst recessions.
Yeah.
Right? I had no idea.
No.
I had no idea what was going on in the world. I didn't understand macroeconomics.
Yeah. Thank goodness you didn't.
Yeah. I mean, of course not, And so I just thought that this wasn't working because I wasn't working hard enough.
Yeah.
And certainly nobody was going to out hustle me.
Right.
I wasn't short on that. I wasn't lazy.
Yeah.
Or ambitious. And so I built it to where I was making about $17,000, almost $20,000 a year. I had a couple of people working for me.
Okay.
And then I got stuck.
Yeah.
And everything I was doing stopped working. So I'd get an account and then one would drop. I'd hire a new person, two would quit. And I was the gerbil on the wheel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one day God blessed me and just, put an angel in my life.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah,
it's
right.
Complete divine intervention.
It was a divine appointment, right?
I was in Crystal Tree Plaza, and he was his office was on the second floor of the plaza. So again, he's second floor, last door. So I had to go up, most people would just kind of cold call the lower level and be done with it, right? No. What are you going to go upstairs to get more no's? I did.
Yeah.
Right. And so I went upstairs and I cold called all the way to the last door. And there was a plaque outside his door, the name of his company. It was called Ideas and Things. What is this?
Yeah.
And I walked in and it was a bunch of empty desks with books just, and it looked like a madman's laboratory.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Just books everywhere. Yeah. He had whiteboards all over the walls with all kinds of writing and things. It was just like, so you walk in, it's, it looked like, Beautiful Mind from, Russell Crowe movie. And out from the back office comes this guy. In his, 60s, silver hair.
Yeah.
He's wearing a kind of Tommy Bahama flowered shirt, kind of khaki jeans, flip-flops. And he must have had 17 wristbands, save the whales, save the trees, save the planet. If it needs saved, Patrick was all for it.
Yeah.
And so I go into my spiel,
Yeah, right.
And he kind of laughed and said, okay, yeah, like, sure, kid, you can clean your house. Right. But sit down, let's talk. And he just listened to me, right? And then he asked me questions like what my goals were, what was my purpose? And I was making it up as I was going along, right? I was just thinking, what do I need to say so this guy will give me the keys to his office so I can clean it? That's all I was thinking,
right?
And he said, look, you can clean the office, but I think I can help you in a bigger way. And he reached behind him. He had shelves of like all the same books.
Yeah.
So, book he pulls was thinking we're rich, but he must have had 2 shelves of them. And then he had rows of psycho-cybernetics, all brand new books.
Yeah.
And the guy had bought, I don't know, he probably spent $100,000 on books and programs. And he had like his own lending library.
Yeah.
Basically. Okay. So he gives me the book and says that, if I do what he says, the way he says it, the number of times he says it, for how long he says to do it, it won't be my fault if I'm not a millionaire in 5 years.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, what do I have to lose? Right. Yeah. My way wasn't working. Right. Obviously, my way's not working, right?
And in 5 years, it wasn't getting you there. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I had no other plan.
Yeah.
My other plan was whatever was on the schedule for that night to clean. Yep. That was my plan, And he did. He spent the next kind of 3 years taking me through that book and just focused on teaching me how to think.
Yeah.
Now, he knew nothing about the cleaning business.
Right.
He knew nothing about marketing. He knew nothing about chemicals, but he just taught me how to think.
Right.
And in the first, 2 years, I was making about $250,000.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty significant change.
Yeah. From 17 or 20.
Yeah. It's about an 18X that, right? And then it went over $1 million.
Yeah.
And he was absolutely right. And I thought all I did was change the way I thought,
Yeah.
That's really all I did.
Yes.
Because I didn't have, I didn't immediately start having money to market and buy new equipment and, break into different profit centers. But by the time I sold the company, we had 11 divisions of the company, And the interesting thing is that I started buying the book and I would give it to everybody.
Yep.
And I'd run into him 6 months later and ask him,
how's it going?
And most of them had never even read the book.
Right.
Some people opened it up and, read maybe a chapter or two.
Yeah.
And so they didn't get rich.
Right.
And then I realized it wasn't in the book. The magic wasn't in the book.
Yeah.
And the magic wasn't even in me. The magic was the alchemy of the book, my desire, and a process.
Yeah.
Right? That's what it was.
Yeah.
And then I thought, okay, I'm going to commit my life to doing this. I'm going to help other people. Yeah. And I think that's what happens. That's a beautiful thing about personal growth is when your light goes on and you start to change, you just want to give it away.
I heard this interview with Don Henley once. And he was, had gone from full on addiction world to health.
Yeah.
And he said, there's nothing more zealous than a convert.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Isn't that true?
Yeah. Yeah. When you've seen transformation in your life, it's like, why doesn't everybody know that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not only why aren't they? They need to, right?
They need to know it. Yeah.
And so I decided that I was going to, commit my life to that. And what would then happen is I would go on and I would meet Bob Proctor.
Yeah.
Who, was one of the guys that Patrick had me study.
Okay. So you got introduced to just knowing who he was through Patrick.
Yeah. Just all I did was watch a videotape that he made in 1988.
And
he had never done anything else.
In terms of
program,
actually meeting him and being in the room with him?
2005.
Okay.
2005, April 2005. And then I sold my business in March of 2006. So 1 year later. So I met him.
Yeah.
I signed up for his program to become a certified coach. And it was a terrible program, but I put in proximity.
But you got close.
And then he and I developed a friendship over that year.
Yep.
And then I sold the company, invested $300,000 to partner with him.
Yeah.
And start his certification program.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then from there, as I was building that business and we were certifying people to teach Bob's content, we were doing a 5-day live event. I realized, nobody, no matter who they are, can keep an audience's, attention for 5 days. Right. You need other people.
Yeah.
And so I started to bring in other speakers, which got me introduced to them. Yeah. So I worked with Wayne Dyer and Zig Ziglar and Les Brown and Brian Tracy and Jack Canfield and then John Maxwell. And that's how I first met John Maxwell.
Yeah.
And then, the rest is kind of history.
Well, I mean, look, I don't want people to miss when you first met Bob Proctor, when you were first going to physically be in the same room with him.
Yeah.
What did it take for you to get in the room with him?
Yeah.
And
it's a great story because I was in the cleaning business.
Yeah.
I was doing really well.
Right.
The business was, we were cleaning 100 buildings a day.
Yeah.
I had 150 employees. I was making $350,000 a year, basically playing solitaire, on the computer, just staying out of the way of the business and letting it do its thing. I had built, I was a big student of the E-Myth.
Okay.
Of Michael Gerber, of just kind of building systems within the business and getting it right and then staying out of the way.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
And so that's what I had done. I was having dinner with a friend one night and she said, if you could do anything, what would you do? And I said, oh, well, I would, I'd want to work with this guy, Bob Proctor.
Yeah.
It was a Friday night.
Yeah.
Then that Sunday, I was back at the same, I was going through a divorce at the time. So there was a place called Hops. I don't know if you've ever heard of Hops. It's a kind of a big burger joint, but they make their own beer, right?
Okay.
I don't drink beer, but a great burger place.
Sure.
And so I was kind of a regular there. So Sunday morning I was there because they did a breakfast and I'm reading the newspaper and I see this little ad in the business section, meet Bob Proctor at the Breakers Hotel in Palm Beach. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I send in an email to the address and I don't hear anything in a couple of days. So I call up and I'm talking to this woman. I don't realize it's his wife, Linda.
Right.
And I said, oh, I had sent in this application to, be one of the 100 people to meet Bob Proctor at this seminar. And she said, oh, it's closed. So, once it was filled, we probably
didn't answer.
And I said, oh, she said, well, tell me a little bit about yourself. And I said, well, I'm Bob's biggest fan. I've been listening to him since the beginning of the time. And, his life is my life. Like he dropped out of school. He grew up in a bad home. I grew up in a bad home. Right. He dropped out of school. I dropped out of school. He went into the Navy. I went into the Guardian Angels.
Right.
He went into the cleaning business. I went into the cleaning business. He was listening to Earl Nightingale. I was listening to Born Rich.
Yeah.
Somebody, his Rayford Stafford gave him Think and Grow Rich. Patrick Hayes gave me. I mean, it was the stories were parallel.
Right.
And she said, you know what? Why don't you go ahead? Tomorrow you go over to the breakers and you tell them Linda, I'm his wife. Is oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You go over and you tell them I said to let you in. So the day comes for me to meet Bob Proctor. At the time, again, I'm going through a divorce. I'm living by myself. I got 2 boxer dogs.
Yep.
I put my dogs out early in the morning. I'm getting ready to, get over there.
Yeah.
And I'm all dressed, suit and tie, call the dogs in, and they're gone. And
right.
The dogs are like my life.
Yeah, right.
And they had never done that. They had dug under the fence and they were gone. And one of the benefits of having a cleaning company is that, I've got 100 employees, right?
Yeah.
And so this is like 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. And my concern was my neighborhood led out to a really busy, big street. So I call all my night crews and I've got, 50 Spanish people.
You got the grid covered.
We don't get the dogs back to about 11 o'clock.
Oh my goodness.
That morning. And I'm a puddle.
Yeah. Right.
I'm an emotional. And so I don't go. The next day, Linda Proctor. Paul, this is Linda Proctor. How was it? I haven't talked to Bob. How was it? And I was like, I didn't go. She's like, you didn't go?
Yeah, right.
Like, what? It's like, yeah, I didn't go. And she's like, oh, well, we're dog people.
Yeah.
No problem. She said, look, Bob's going to Japan. I'm going to leave a note for him on his desk. And when he comes back, he'll be back in 10 days or something. I'm going to have him call you. Said, okay.
Nice.
Well, I forgot completely.
Yeah.
And one Saturday morning, I'm in my office and I'm doing the billing and my phone rings. I answer it. Hello. So Paul, Bob Proctor. And the first thing I said to Bob Proctor was shut up. I did a total like Elaine from Seinfeld. Right. I said, shut up. No way. And he and I talked for about 2 hours.
Nice.
And he said, look, I'm doing a Born Rich seminar up here in Toronto. Why don't you come on up? And instantly I thought, he's trying to sell me.
Right.
And I said, well, I've seen the program, a million times. He said, you haven't even seen it once if you haven't seen it live.
Right.
And I knew he was right.
You're right.
And I said, oh, what the hell?
Yeah.
I want to meet him anyways.
Yeah.
He's on my bucket list. It was him and Elton John are the 2 people I wanted to meet.
Yeah, right.
So I said.
And Elton wasn't calling.
Yeah, he wasn't calling me. So I went up to Toronto. And now you got to remember, I had never seen Bob Proctor.
Right.
All I'd been watching, Bob Proctor was on a video cassette tape from 1988.
Yeah.
This is 2005. Right? So we're 20 years later. And so when the doors open, Bob's standing there and he looks like Moses. He's got white hair, not red hair, right? He's got these big white eyebrows, right? I'm like, and I don't know what I don't know why I was expecting that it did. But over those 3 days, I was the most annoying guy in the seminar, right? Because on every break I would run up, oh my God.
Yeah, right.
And so at the end, he's doing this pitch that he's going to start licensing people to, teach his stuff. Right. And so I, ran up to the room and said, absolutely. Well, what's it cost?
Yeah.
And I'll never forget what he said. He said, what's that have to do with anything? And like he wanted an answer,
right?
And I was like, well, I just kind of want to know, like what's so. Well, either you want to do it or not. I mean, if it's $1 million, you won't do it. Then because if you say you want to do it, if it's $1 million, you're not going to do it because it's $1 million and you don't want it.
Yeah.
Like at what level do you not want to do it?
Right.
Like what level are you going to sell your dream off? Is basically what he's asking.
Right.
And it was like $13,000.
Yeah.
And so, I had the money,
right,
but I had never spent $13,000 on, anything other than a car or a house,
right,
let alone some certification. So I paid it.
Yeah.
I went up to Toronto, and it was terrible. It was 6 days. It was disorganized. There were like 9 people in the room.
Right.
And the only thing is, we had Bob Proctor for 5 days.
Yeah.
With 9 people in the room, and the other of them, really didn't know what I knew going in, and hadn't done what I had done.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I used his stuff.
Yeah.
And Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
And Truman Fleet stuff, because that's basically what Bob is teaching, is concept therapy. Right. He just made it palatable.
Yes.
Right. And I had done it to become a millionaire, you know? And so I went home, and, I had a, dining room full table of product. Basically he was selling you 13,000 pounds of stuff. Right. He sold the program by the pound. And I thought, I either got to start selling this stuff or eat it.
Right.
So I started, and I started doing mastermind groups. Yeah. I did my first seminar. 6 people came. Yeah. I sold 100 tickets. 6 people came, and I realized I'm really good at selling tickets. Yeah. Right. But nobody wants to pay. Nobody wants to give me their time. Right. Yes. And then I thought, okay, I've got to prove my value. And that's when I came up with the idea for mastermind groups on Think and Grow Rich. And that's how I met Scott Fay, who introduced me to Maxwell later.
Okay. Right.
And so I started doing that, and we started, my mastermind group and we formed a company together. Yeah. And we were doing, 300, 400 people every 90 days. Yeah. And we, I was on the stage, and other people were doing, the other guys in the group were doing other things. Yeah. For this one guy was running the back, other guys were running registration. And it just, it took off. And then I got a call from Bob about 6 months after. And he said, "Hey, what are you doing down there?" I thought I was doing something wrong. I said, "Well, I'm just doing seminars. I mean, right. I'm allowed to do. I'm like licensed for that. I paid the money." He said, "No." He said, "You sold more product than anybody else in the history of the company other than me. Whatever you're doing, it's working." Yeah. He said, "What are you doing this weekend?" And I said, "Whatever you tell me to." He said, "Come out to Vegas. I'm teaching a Science of Getting Rich seminar. Let's meet out there." So I flew out there. Yeah. And unbeknownst to me, on day 2, I'm sitting in the back of the room, and he's introducing somebody, and who he's introducing to, the guy has like my life story. Right. And it's me. He didn't tell me. And so he says, "So I'm going to call this young guy up. I just met him about 6 months." And he pulls me up. Yeah. And I get up on stage, and he's going to teach you he's going to teach you about self-image. The guy's got a great story on his self-image. Yeah. And so I get up there, you do the speaker's hug, and he says, "Don't screw it up." And so I do. I kill it. Yeah. Because you were doing it in the room with people. Yeah. And so I went home, and he called me and said, "Hey, look, you're pretty good." Yeah. And he says, "In about 10 years, you'll be pretty big in Florida. Yeah. Or if you want, we can partner together. Yeah. You could sell your company and come partner with me. Yeah. And I'll put you on the world map." And I said, "I'm in." 90 days later, I sold the company for $1 million, paid him $300,000 and took Life Success Consultants. And we did, in the 4 years I was with them, we had a publishing division, we had a coaching division, we had the certification program, we had a program called the Wealth Lab, which was the high-end mentoring. We probably did $50 million worth of business. Nice. And then it was time for me to move on. And so I resigned and started working with Les Brown in Empowerment Mentoring. Okay. And I started a company called Empowerment Mentoring program. Yeah. And Les Brown helped me get that program off the ground. And then an introduction to John Maxwell came about. And, John, had already sold his business. He was on the white horse riding out to retirement, thought he was done. Yep. And I said, "Look, I think you got a huge business." Yeah. And I said, "Here's what I'll do." And everybody had pitched John before. Yeah, right. I said, "But, here's what I'll do is I'll front all the money. I'll build everything. It's going to cost about $500,000. I'll put all the money up front. Guarantee you the first $1 million. Mm-hmm. And, you've got to work about 6 days a year, and you'll never make less than $1 million, guaranteed." Yeah. And we did with John, by by the time we were done with the certification revenue, the mentorship revenue, all the, all the gear store and stuff, and the increase in his sales, he had an event called Exchange that, when I joined, it was like $10,000 or $15,000 and they had, 40 people in it. Yeah. Right? And we were doing close to 200. Yeah. Plus what happened with his nonprofits, a rising tide of about $562 million worth of just growth in his brand in that 10-year period of time. Right. Yeah. And so I had, the model worked. Right. And John, both John and Bob, were really good they were good number ones to be a number two. Sure. For the time that I was number two with them. Right. They were the right number one to be building for. Yeah.
You were the kingmaker in this.
Yeah. And I mean, Bob, on any given day, I don't think there's a better teacher on the planet.
Sure.
It's a shame that he's passed. And there's people who just never got a chance to hear him because he just never. Again, you don't outperform your own self-image, and Bob just never made it mainstream. Yeah. He just never made it mainstream. And if he would have, nobody would have ever gone and seen Anthony Robbins.
Right.
He was like the best kept secret.
Yeah.
And John is one of the wisest guys in the world.
Sure.
The wisdom, he served so many years as a pastor.
Right.
And as a pastor, all you deal with people's, stuff.
Yeah. And he's got such a sage way of, he has all these pithy statements
and a master connection. Right? Yeah. He's got Bob didn't have the magnetism or charisma that John had.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But John didn't have the depth of content.
Yeah.
That Bob did, but both had wisdom.
Yeah.
Both were they both had lived a full life, and traveled the world and really understood people.
Yeah.
Nice. And so what a great opportunity. When I get into the speaking business, I'm 40 years old.
Right.
I'm 40 years old. And in those first 3 or 4 years with Bob, think about it. I worked directly with, like in green room, out to dinner with, right? Wayne Dyer, Les Brown, Jack Canfield, Mark Victor Hansen, Brian Tracy, Dennis Waitley.
Yeah.
John Maxwell. No up and coming speaker, ever would have that access.
No.
Right. So the three, that's why I say, proximity is power. Who you learn from matters. The $300,000 I paid to go to the front of the line with Bob, was the best $300,000. I think it's come back to me tenfold, easy.
Yeah. And you think about all those pivotal moments that made such a difference. Oh, you move forward, and just that opportunity when Bob called you up on stage.
Yeah.
Unbeknownst to you, right?
Yeah.
That was a job interview, obviously, right?
Yeah. Didn't know it.
And you didn't know.
But I was prepared, right?
Yeah. And you were ready. Yeah. And you stepped up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got, you keep saying yes. And I think that's the thing for entrepreneurs is you don't know what's around the corner.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things for an entrepreneur is you have to understand that God is conspiring for your highest good.
Yeah.
There are things that are being done right now that you have no idea. At the moment you get an idea, you are instantly and automatically connected to everything, everybody, every resource. Now, the problem is that it's like a fish.
Yes.
So you cast a line and you get fish on. That's completely different than fish on the boat.
Right.
It's completely different than fish on the plate, for sure.
Yeah.
Right. That's completely different than a full belly at night. Right. But it is fish on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the next process is you reeling that in. And that's the process of faith.
Yeah.
Right? That's the process of persistence. That's the process of imagination. And that's what you're doing. But I see entrepreneurs, it's the epitome of the 3 feet from gold story where they quit.
Yeah.
Or they give up on themselves, or they second guess themselves, or they sell themselves short.
Yep.
And they just don't realize how close they are.
Yeah.
And I just, it just kills me to see people who are that close and they walk away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When you didn't.
No.
Well, and
I couldn't, I could, and the good news is that I couldn't afford to, because my limited programming is both a blessing and a curse, as all things. The the power of the paradigm is you don't have anything to fall back on.
Yeah.
So you got to make this work.
Yeah.
Has been a great motivator for me.
Yeah, right. You've burned the ships, right?
You bet.
Yeah. Yeah.
You bet.
Moving on. Yeah. And look, I for one am very glad that you didn't give up.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm among millions of people.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
So, so the impact is there. And let me just ask, just in terms of the increase in your awareness, let's kind of help people understand. I mean, we've kind of talked about how one experience led to another. How would you say, let's use this word, expectations. Let's take you back let's just go from the moment you sold your cleaning company. What do you think in the moment you sold that and you saw that I built something, it was worthwhile, I got a huge return on it, and then, kind of progressing through, how did that moment itself change you? And how have your expectations changed over the years that followed?
Well, it's a great question, because I think selling the cleaning business was a huge aha.
Yeah.
Because I realized I just sold my job.
Yeah.
Most people never sell their job.
Right.
And I thought, I don't ever want another job that I can't sell.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I want equity positions in everything going forward. Right. And that was a big shift in my awareness,
right,
and how I did business, right? And it did set up an expectation that, hard work will pay off.
Yeah.
Because I think for most entrepreneurs, they're willing to do the work.
Yeah, right.
They're willing to be the maniac at 4 o'clock in the morning.
And I think that they would say, if people were asking, they would say, I'm passionate about this, right?
Oh, yeah.
But it's one thing to be passionate, but it's another thing to get the results, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, passionate people can light themselves on fire too, right, and burn out. I mean, there's no heroic to passion.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I think, it's when you take passion, and blend it with purpose and a strategic plan, right? I think things begin to change. Right?
Yeah.
Then you begin to really build something.
Sure.
Right? And so for me, I think the expectation was that I'm willing to work hard because I know there is a pot of gold at the end of this rainbow. So I'm willing to, sacrifice it all.
Yeah. So there's the part of you that might have previously negotiated whether the idea of a pot of gold.
Right.
You weren't negotiating anymore.
Yeah, because like the first 3 or 4 years of the cleaning business, all I did was negotiate with it. Right.
Yeah.
I was always looking to next deal it. I became an Amway distributor. I started selling knives on the side.
Yeah.
I was just, I was always looking for something better. Right.
Right.
And, it was, again, the mentorship of Patrick, it just said, let's just stop for a minute here and just let's look at what you're creating.
Yeah.
And just think about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he said, I want you to think about, forget the cleaning business. I want you to think about, you own Coca-Cola dispensers, and you get the contract to put them on the highway, on the turnpike, all the way up to New York, right? And every one of those machines that you keep operational and you keep filled and you keep running, every month you go and all you do is you empty out baskets full of quarters. Every one of them.
Yeah.
He said, well, that's how every single one of, when you sell a doctor's office, if you get it up and running, and then, you get somebody in there that you can trust, and you pay them really well and pay them fairly so that you don't have to, so that they're keeping the machine operational.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Make it so that you pay them so much that they couldn't afford to quit.
Right.
Find out what it is that they want. Help them get it through cleaning the toilets.
Right.
And that's what I did.
Yeah.
And so I understood also then the process of duplication.
Yeah.
And that's why the licensing business was so exciting for me, because I saw it, and I had licensed a couple of distributorships in my cleaning business, and I saw that there's real money in that.
Yeah. Right.
Right. So I had that awareness as well.
Yeah.
Let's
think about the time when you sold the cleaning business. How much do you think prior to the sale you personally were making a month about that time?
$30,000.
$30,000.
Yeah, I was making $350 a year. So
okay.
So that's about $30,000.
Okay.
Isn't it?
Okay.
Close to it. Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what would be your expectation about $30,000 today? Like, in other words, how long should it take you to make $30,000?
Oh, yeah. Right? I mean, yeah. A week.
Yeah.
Yeah. A day. I mean, in a month, I've got to have some days where that happens.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I've made it in an hour.
Yeah.
I've made it in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And you've been in some of the rooms where I've done it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, I look at it different now.
Yeah.
I focus on what I call a score.
Okay.
Right?
Tell me about that.
So I have a lesson called Think in Millions, right? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, when you're a young
worked
kid.
on it together.
Oh, that's right. There you go.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you're young, you start working, you know, nickels and dimes, and then you start thinking in dollars, and you start thinking in $5, you know, and grandma's giving you $5 in the card, and then you get a babysitting job or you shovel snow, you're making $10. Then you start thinking in 20s. Then you get a job, and now you're making $200 a week. So now you're thinking in hundreds. Then you start thinking in thousands. Then maybe you buy a car, and it forces you to think into 10,000s. Yeah. And then you get older and older, and you get ready to buy a house, and now you're thinking in hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
And that's where it stops for most people.
Mm-hmm.
I think in millions.
Right.
And tens of millions.
Right.
And so, like, I won't even look at an opportunity. If I can't make $1 million, I want nothing to do with it.
Right.
It's just a waste of time, because I know the universe and God are conspiring for my highest good. And if I settle on a $30,000 deal, then I'm occupied.
Right.
And I can't take on. And so my needs are met, and, you know, off it goes. So, you know, I want to remain open for the good that God's going to fill.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think in terms of scores, like, you know, I'm working on, like, a score for 5 million.
Right.
I'm not worried what I do in a month. I don't.
Yeah, right. I understand.
You know, if it all comes in 1 week, and sometimes it works that way.
Well, and I think part of what you're saying, and tell me if I've got this right, is you're not thinking like a manager. You're thinking like an entrepreneur.
Oh yeah, I'm playing a much bigger game. Yeah. I'm playing chess, not checkers. So, and again, that doesn't mean that there's not a very important time in your career as an entrepreneur where you're thinking about, you know, the monthly nut.
Oh yeah, right.
You know, or the daily nut. Hell,
right.
You know, even you got to be dialed into that, and so that is not a knock on that.
Sure.
But eventually, as you evolve, if you don't evolve and you stay and your thinking stays small, if your thinking stays small into, you know, how do we meet the monthly requirements? Right. That's where your focus will go, is meeting just the monthly requirements.
Yeah, and you can get really good at that, right?
You can get that down to a science and miss everything else. Yeah. So I'm looking at, you know, how to, you know, at the end of the year, I want to do $5 or $10 million. Yeah. And so, you know, if I can do that in 2 or 3 scores, that's great. So what's a score going to be? Yeah. And in the interim, I'm doing coaching and mentoring and some other stuff that they keep me sharp, they keep me relevant, they keep me meeting people, keep me engaged, right, and on purpose. Yeah, right. And then I'll meet someone. Yeah. And an idea is birthed. Yeah.
So in terms of expectation, I mean, there's no way you would be thinking at the same level of expectation, and I think that's the key. Is that you said the word spirit in there several times.
You bet.
And that's the spirit expands, right? It's always expansive.
Seeking fuller expression and fuller expansion. Yeah. And so the expectation is I know the next deal. Yeah. So when I was done with, you know, working with John Maxwell, I didn't know who, but I knew some, you know, and in comes, you know, opportunity to work with, you know, Daniel Amen and Joseph McClendon. Sure. And when I was done with, I didn't know who, but then comes a deal and opportunity to work with Dr. Cialdini. Sure. And I don't know who or next. Right. You know? Yeah. And it's not always about working with the next. It could be just something, you know, like I think our sales program is going to lead to a score. I think it's going to be really successful. Absolutely. And I think not only is it going to, you know, I'm not also only looking for the money side of this. I'm looking for an impact now. Like I think the program is going to help a lot of people. Yeah. You know, a lot of people. And the beauty of that is if you want people to be more holy, they got to be more wealthy. Yeah. It's really hard to be holy when you're hungry. Well, it's really hard to be holy when you're worried about the mortgage. It's really hard to be spiritually in line and trusting in God when you're nervous about money.
Yeah.
And so if you can and it doesn't take a lot for most people. Most people, if they can make an extra $5,000 a month, change that's $60,000 a year.
Yeah.
Okay. You do that falling off a log. I mean, it's that simple. And for most people, if they could find a way to, get an extra $5,000 a month, completely, that's changed their life money. And then all of a sudden, now they can be creative.
Yeah.
Now they can be creative. Now they can, now their expectations rise.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, so let me, a couple more things. I think in that, what I've been able to do, it probably more so than many people who have been in sort of your ecosystem, I've been able to be somewhat closer than many people, I think. And I'm only saying that because one of the things that was apparent to me once I started to get close, because like your leap for Bob Proctor, there was a moment at which I had to make a choice to get closer and get proximity to you, right?
Yep.
And I think from the beginning, I had this idea of who you were because I, saw you on stage and I saw you in front of thousands of people. And then all of a sudden I'm in a room and there's 12 people and I'm going, I'm listening to you. I got it. I got to get close. Right.
Right.
And I think from that moment, one of the things among all the other great ideas, the great thinking, the influence on how I think and that sort of thing, the times to be able to be with you and really get clear on a vision and those sort of things. And of course, like the economic impact that it's made on Leaders Fuel and on my business, but it is your generosity. And, you say a lot, and I think it's true. Good people do good things with money.
Yep.
And we happen to be involved with a lot of great people.
Yeah.
And we've seen it over and over again. But I have watched you be incredibly generous, and I think it isn't contrived. It's just flowing out of who you are and whose you are, right?
Yep.
And we had this conversation the other day riding in the truck about, have you ever been surprised by your own generosity? And I think there are those moments where you do just sort of get these affirmations like, look, I realize I have built this model. I'm doing good things with money, and therefore, guess what? How much good can I do in the world? And I appreciate that when I asked you about the money piece, you talked to me about the impact piece, right? The money part is important.
Yep.
Right? And Waddle said, get rich first.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
So, look, I think that part is probably more of a commentary than a question on my part. It's just that I'm just affirming. I'm a person who's been close and been involved in ways that probably other people who are very aware of you haven't been, and it's real.
Oh, well, thank you.
And look, I think that that there's been a natural and supernatural way that's also flowed through my life, and I hope that if people were eulogizing me right now, that's what they'd be saying, right? Well, and, not that I want to rush that. Right.
Well, for me, a big change came through study, of course. Everything I do and I live and think, obviously I've learned from other people.
Yeah.
Right? And
stand on the shoulders of giants, right?
I bet. The concept of the advancing man and Waddle's work, of just, if you really look at how you, in every interaction with somebody, how can you elevate their life?
Yeah.
And if you just focus on that, you hold the original.
Yeah.
You hold the original energy, and it's so rewarding to be generous.
Yeah.
Right. You can't outgive God.
Right.
You just can't.
Yeah.
And I'm also strategic in it. And I also I like to think that the way that I give is typically effectual in that I'm watching somebody take a step forward.
Right.
And then I'm going to, after, but they've got to go first.
Yeah.
In many cases, I've got to see that they've got skin in the game.
Yeah. Right.
Because I've done it the other way.
Right. I've seen the results.
Yeah. I've seen. Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, I'm very thankful for who you are in my life and definitely for your influence. And I look forward to, continued work with you and I certainly appreciate that we've been able to take it. I know your time is very valuable, and I appreciate your time here to speak into this community and be a part of this podcast as well. I guess my last question is there in this last hour, is there a question I should have asked you that I haven't asked you?
Yeah, well, first off, thank you. And again, like I said, my kindness, my generosity, my giftedness is always in response to somebody's first efforts, right?
Yeah,
and so I've watched you bet on you.
Yeah.
And I've watched you risk and, get out of the boat to walk on the water, right? And I've seen you do it.
Yeah.
And I've trusted you by sending you clients, and every single person has come back and said thank you, and so you've earned that too. So
I appreciate it.
Like I said, I've given you an opportunity, right? And you've leveraged it and you've worked it, and God bless, right? Salute, and that's the way it should be. And I think that's a beautiful part of our relationship, right?
Sure.
I don't know if there's anything that you should have asked. I think if there, for most people, an understanding that we either don't have or we mitigate, is that it's not an accident that idea is in your mind right now.
Right.
I don't know what it is. Maybe it's an idea to build a business or quit a job or that. What you're seeing is not a potential future.
Yeah.
Right. What you're seeing is the shadow or reflection of something already done.
Yeah.
It's already done.
Yeah.
That's what you're seeing. So you're not seeing what could be.
Yeah.
Right. What you're seeing is the shadow of what's there. And it's just waiting for you to turn the corner.
Yeah.
Right. And I think if you could move on faith on that,
yes,
I think you'd go further and faster.
It is very meta until it's not.
Amen.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
You bet.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.